but what do you know about its history? Who was involved in its inception? And why did it become a thing, considering the many great outreach programs and mission partnerships that the LCMS has with so many programs and organizations? Why did this become kind of a flagship?
Yeah, no, great question. So a little bit on the history. Um, Back in the early 90s, as the Iron Curtain was falling in Russia, there is a history of Lutheranism in Russia. And when communism took over, basically all these Lutherans just kind of went into hiding. But we know historically, and we had enough contact that Lutheranism was surviving, but they didn't have anything. I mean, under communism for those 70 years. So basically, as communism was falling, the person who founded Lutheran Heritage Foundation, Reverend Robert Ron, he's got his doctorate now. Reverend Ron, basically, he said, you know what? The Lutherans in Russia, the people in Russia need the Word of God explained to them, and so Russian Bibles and Russian catechisms. And so he went over to Russia and found somebody who was willing to translate the Luther Small Catechism into the Russian language so that Lutherans could have the Word of God explained to them again in their own language. And he spearheaded this whole thing. So 1992, just over 25 years ago now, this is what happened. I wasn't anything with it, but Lutheran Heritage Foundation started by translating Luther's Small Catechism into the Russian language so that people could have the Word of God explained to them in their own language. And from there, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're now to the point where this year we'll be doing our 100th different language of Luther's Small Catechism that we will translate, publish, and distribute and introduce. I'm not quite sure. I should have probably looked this up, but I'm not quite sure which language this one's in. But the 100th edition of Luther's Small Catechism in a different language, so people can have the Word of God explained in their own language. That's real important. We like explaining it that way. Lutheran Bible translators and other organizations do the Bibles. But what we're all about are the books that explain the Bible, from Luther's Small Catechism, A Child's Garden of Bible Stories for kids, the one that a lot of the congregations in the area, this one, the Bible Story in Pictures, it's a graphic novel of Bible stories. Yeah, really, exactly. Everybody my generation and younger are like, that's so cool, you know. But so, I mean, we've done the Book of Concord, Spirituality of the Cross. I mean, we have done it. And so our history, though, sorry to get back to the history, is rooted in the Small Catechism so that people can have the Word of God explained to them in their own language. Yep.
That is spectacular. Now so with the startings in Russia and then kind of, I guess, would just snake out to the surrounding countries from there. What kind of milestone highlights do you know of before you ended up joining or getting roped in? Like what were the big milestones that really kind of cemented it as the powerhouse that it seems to be right now?
That's a great question, and I mean, this isn't a single milestone, but what amazes me is a twofold. One is the idea that nobody had thought to do this before. This idea that well, back up a little bit. Back in the 1500s, when Luther was doing his thing, first thing he does is translate the Bible into the German language, the New Testament, and it gets out there to the people. I mean, it's out there. The Word of God is, and then he starts visiting the churches there, and he's realizing even though they have the Word of God, they have no idea what it means. And so, within years of translating the Bible into the German language, he says, "Nah, they need a book to explain to them what the Bible means." And here we as Lutherans have been living off that book and having the Word of God explained to us, but we've been sitting on it in our language. And we're like, we got missionaries, we got schools throughout the world who are trying to teach people about what God's words mean, and they need to have the Bible explained to them. And just that understanding that somebody came up with that in the late 1980s, early 1990s, it's like, well, duh. that just makes sense. I mean, like you said, the Book of Concord, so your dad almost had you reading it by 8th or 9th grade, it helps us understand the Word of God. One of the things when I go around to churches and talk, I say, hey, if I were to find 50 people who had never read the Bible before and they were all willing to read it and sit down and gather them all back up together after they had all read it. And I asked those 50 people, what's the point of the Bible? What does it mean? How many different opinions do you think I'm going to get?
Oh, God.
And
55.
Exactly. That's so funny you say that, because when I go to a church, they're all like 50. I'm like, no, 75 or more.
Yeah.
For real. And so I guess for me, the biggest milestone isn't we reached a point, but that somebody actually thought to do this and pursued it. And then on top of that is, we are literally the only organization in LCMS, that is doing this. Now, like CPH will do some of their books in other languages, and there are sometimes, a missionary in a certain area will translate certain books, but we are the only registered organization, recognized service organization in the LCMS that's our goal, is to translate our Lutheran books into languages worldwide and give them away.